Washington Journal continues.
Joining us from New York this morning is Melissa Bryant. She's the Chief Policy Officer for the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Melissa Bryant, let's just begin with your group. Who do you represent?
Well, we are the premier veterans empowerment organization representing the post 9/11 generation, men and women who served like myself. I served in the Iraq War, and we represent the diversity and the multitude of issues that our generation believes in.
What are the top priorities for veterans, do you think?
Well, our top priorities at least for the post 9/11 generation, we've recently outlined in what we call our Big Six policy priorities. Those Big Six include continuing to combat suicide. Unfortunately, the statistic you may often hear is 20 veteran suicides per day, and so we're continuing to promote mental health to combat suicide. We continue to support women veterans like myself. Many don't recognize our service. Many don't recognize me as a veteran when they see me. And so we continue to fight for the improvement of care that the VA provides for us, as well as to recognize our service in the military. We also look to reform government. That includes both the Department of Veterans Affairs as well as the Department of Defense, and ensuring that government works for all veterans and military. We ask for defense of the GI Bill, a very invaluable tool that many veterans like myself have used to pursue higher education and in some cases trade schools. We also look to, we've included two new initiatives this year. One is to support those with injuries from burn pits or other toxic exposures. You may have heard, those of us downrange, over 80% of our members polled have responded that they've been exposed to burn pits and feel the health impacts such as pulmonary and respiratory issues associated with burn pits and toxic exposures. And then lastly, we want to empower veterans who want to utilize cannabis. Over the years, our members have told us that they want to see medical usage of cannabis to be an option for them, particularly for mental health injuries like PTSD and other ways in which there is data to show that it could perhaps help them.
Melissa Bryant, according to the government, February 2018 veteran unemployment rate was 3.5%, down from 3.9% in February of 2017. Do you see things improving for veterans on the job front?
Things are improving, but there's still a ways to go. Sometimes those statistics can be misleading, particularly, again, for women veterans. We tend to be underemployed. We tend to have higher unemployment rates. So things are improving. That's through the hard work of Congress and through nonprofit organizations like IAVA. However, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. I mentioned the GI Bill before, and the GI Bill is an invaluable tool that allows for veterans to close the gap in skills they may have acquired through the military and to translate that into a civilian career. So that's one step. We also need employers to continue to hire veterans and continue to recognize the value that we bring from our service to their organizations and to companies and businesses. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially when you look across homelessness rates and other areas where veterans are impacted. Everyone's still not doing okay.
And we want to hear from veterans this morning as well. Your line for calling in is 202-748-8000. I want to hear from you. Do you think that it's improving for veterans, or what sort of changes do you think there needs to be? And then all others dial in at 202-748-8001. Melissa Bryant, do you think veterans issues have benefited from the Trump administration? Have things improved?
It's a mixed bag. There have been many or several major pieces of legislation that got passed in 2017. I wouldn't necessarily credit it entirely to the Trump administration. Many pieces of legislation that went through last year, such as the expansion of the GI Bill. There's now a work to begin on a memorial for the global war on terrorism to honor the fallen from my generation. There have been appeals reform and accountability reform for the Veterans Affairs Department. a lot of these bills have been years in the making, and so the bills that were enacted into law last year, while major achievements for the veterans community, it was through the hard work of veteran service organizations like ours in advocating on the Hill with lawmakers in order to get that through. So it's a bit of a mixed bag in saying yes and no of whether the administration has credit for what's happening, an improvement in the lives for veterans.
And what kind of grade do you give Dr. David Shulkin? He has been criticized up on Capitol Hill from some lawmakers. He also has some ardent supporters up there as well.
This is true. Our members were polled just a couple of weeks ago. We published the results of that poll. If you go to IAVA.org, you can see those results. But again, it's a mixed bag. Within the post 9/11 generation, we highly regard accountability. We were raised as military leaders, and as military leaders, you're responsible for what happens at the top. So when you hear disturbing IG reports, not just the personal reports happening regarding Dr. Shulkin's travel, but also IG reports surrounding what happened in the D.C. VA Medical Center, what's happening in several other medical centers where there are apparently supply chain issues and other systemic problems within the VA networks, hospital networks. That's something that's very disturbing to our population, and unfortunately, those who are at the top are accountable for that. And so when you look at our poll results, you'll see those who are not necessarily trustful of the VA, are not necessarily trustful of Dr. Shulkin, but do appreciate the services that the VA provides. We also found that the majority of our membership who come to the VA, once they're able to get into the bureaucracy, they enjoy the health care that's provided to them by the VA. The challenge is, again, that barrier to access.
Should the president fire Dr. Shulkin?
You know, I can't make that determination of whether he should or should not. I'll say it's deeply troubling. It takes away from the issues I laid out earlier. All of this is a distraction from what is best for veterans and getting those important pieces of legislation through, getting important policies enacted through the Department of Veterans Affairs. Whether he should or shouldn't really isn't the bigger question. The bigger question is this good for veterans? And the answer is no.
Let's go to calls. Hank in Patrick, South Carolina. Good morning.
Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to comment on Dr. Shulkin. I think he's doing a good job. There's no comparison between 5 and 6 years ago, the VA, in the last couple of years. I mean, it's night and day. And I've been there. I've seen it. And if people would just leave him alone and let him do the job, and I think he can get it straight. I think he's the one to get it straight. We don't want to change right here in the middle when everything's looking up and it's getting better. Why change right now?
Hank, what have you seen? You said you've seen improvement. What have you seen?
Oh, I've seen them cuss out people, ignore them, to ask them why. They've even asked me what am I doing there? Just run people off. Now they treat you like you deserve to be treated. I mean, and the doctors are better, the nurses are better, everything is better the last couple of years. For a while there, I wouldn't even go. It hurt me to even go.
Okay, all right. Okay, Melissa Bryant?
Yes, I'm encouraged to hear that you're having better treatment at the VA. What you're describing has long been, unfortunately, one of the culture challenges within the VA. I mentioned before at the start of our segment that as a woman veteran, I've gone to the VA and I've been asked, where's my spouse? Where's my sponsor? And so that's something where, again, we fight for the recognition of women who are the growing population who use veteran care. And what I'm hearing from you, sir, is that a lot of the reforms that veteran service organizations like mine have pushed for, a lot of the culture change that we've demanded of the Department of Veterans Affairs is finally taking hold. And like I said earlier, our members who responded to our recent annual member survey told us that once they are able to enter the VA, they're satisfied with the care that they receive. And so I'm glad that you've seen that turnaround. It's not your father's VA, so I know a lot of things have changed.
Melissa Bryant, tell our viewers when and where you served.
I served in the U.S. Army. I was a military intelligence officer. I was commissioned pre-9/11, and then my whole world was turned upside down. And I served downrange in Iraq, from 2005 through to 2007.
What does downrange mean?
Downrange means out in the forward area. It means that whether you're talking Iraq, Afghanistan, or any of the other hot spots around the world outside of the continental United States, that's downrange for us. And so one of the things that we'd like to point out is that despite the fact that our name, or I should say despite the fact that our name is IAVA doesn't mean that we only represent Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. We represent all of those who serve in a forward deployed area.
We'll go to Christine, who's a veteran in Suncook, New Hampshire.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning.
Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to support the VA in all I could do. They did save my life several years ago, and I really didn't have to use the benefits. I think that a lot of the veterans, I hope like me, are just gracious. We sign that check for the government up to and including our lives. Because that's what we want to do. It's not because we want recognition. And I want to say that for all veterans, because I know veterans, when they need something, they should get it. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be recognized like it's a huge problem. I've been helped. I've been saved. My gosh, saved on July 4th, believe it or not, from a stroke. And I'll tell you, I couldn't say enough about the VA and the way they treated me once they realized who I was. And it wasn't a big deal at all. And it never has been for the last 3-4 years I've been surviving now.
Okay. Melissa Bryant, your thoughts?
Yes, again, I'm always pleased and encouraged to hear of those who have access to VA care, who have been able to receive care from the VA and have had positive outcomes. That's the goal. That's what we fight for. That's what drives me to do this work every day. That's why our organization exists. We're also here to fight for those who don't always have those positive outcomes, and we need to ensure that we're supporting all veterans.
And Melissa Bryant, what are the numbers of those that don't have positive outcomes?
For our members who have reported within our annual member survey, our most recent numbers state that an overwhelming majority, I believe the number is around 65%, believe that they have a positive outcome once they receive access to care. But you see those numbers precipitously drop when you're talking about getting into the VA and being able to receive benefits, being able to receive disability compensation and the like. That's where the challenge still lies, and I know that the leadership of the VA are well aware of that challenge. We continue to work with them on a daily basis in order to ensure that they're improving their policies and improving that access to care.
And access to care was the motivation for lawmakers to create the choice program. I want to show our viewers what Dr. Shulkin had to say, the VA secretary, when he testified Wednesday about the budget. Here's what he's had to say about that choice program.
How could you argue against wanting veterans to have choice and the best type of care? I think what you're hearing from some other members of the committee are that VA for decades has been put in an inferior position by being undercapitalized, by having bureaucratic rules on how to hire. And so if we can make this a more modern system to allow VA to be able to have the type of services we want and the private sector to be available to veterans, I think that's the best system possible, because then the veteran has the choice. So I think while it's difficult, maybe I make nobody happy with this answer, we're trying to balance an investment in VA to make it a stronger system at the same time that we're trying to make sure that we're not keeping veterans in a system that isn't working for them.
Melissa Bryant, your take on the choice program and what you just heard there from the secretary.
The choice program has been riddled with problems since its inception post the scandal out of the Phoenix VA Medical Center in 2014. We have long fought for reforms to the VA choice program. There is legislation that was pending that was originally intended to be included in the omnibus that just passed early this morning, where it would have consolidated the community care program. That's where veterans go outside of the VA in order to receive care. It would have taken away some of the bureaucratic rules that Dr. Shulkin described in his testimony, and it would have allowed for expanded access for caregivers of veterans from other generations beyond post 9/11. Those plans and that deal were scrapped from the omnibus. It became something that was a bit too political. The choice program itself has become a part of a partisan fight where it's centered around what's become an ugly word in Washington, D.C., and that's privatization of the VA. Our organization, IAVA, fights for the investment in the VA, the investment in the VA's core principles, foundational services that they provide to veterans. We know that our veterans who go to the VA, again, they appreciate their care, they appreciate the culture of the VA and an understanding service-connected disabilities and other challenges that veterans may face that may be different from going to civilian facilities. However, with the choice program, that's become problematic in investing equally into the VA as well as investing in the choice program. And so it's disappointing to see that the reforms that were intended, that we have backed in working with lawmakers, did not make it through into the omnibus.
Darren in Tampa, Florida. You're on the air with Melissa Bryant. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well.
Yes, I wanted to say that I'm a veteran, combat veteran. I served in the United States Marine Corps, served in Iraq from 2004 until early 2004 until early 2005. And all I can say is that my experiences with the VA was, hot and cold, because a lot of the VA and stuff, they really didn't treat veterans like they really needed to. They didn't give them care, They're very disrespectful, and there wasn't no accountability. That was like 7 or 8 years ago. But ever since this new secretary has came in, he's made a lot of changes, and I've seen a lot of people be held accountable for their action. But there's still a lot of more work to do, and I feel that there's a lot more that can be done.
Darren, what more? What more can be done?
More programs, because a lot of us suffer with PTSD and other conditions of that nature, and I feel that pumping veterans with medication to keep them sedated is not good. I feel that they should have more programs that's community oriented to help some veterans get integrated back into the community, help them feel like they're a contributing person to society, because just doping them up is not really helping them.
Okay, all right. Let's leave it there. Melissa Bryant.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and that's why organizations like mine exist and other veteran service organizations. We don't exist just to, help with navigating the bureaucracy. We're also there for the camaraderie and for the shared experiences and joining together with our fellow veterans who have served. And so I would highly encourage anyone who's looking for that sense of community, especially once you've transitioned out, because it can feel lonely once you've transitioned out of the military, to seek out those veteran service organizations that allow for that space for community where we can talk about our shared experiences. And I'll say that again, I'm encouraged to hear that you're seeing a positive trend in the VA, and we very much take to heart that there is more work to be done, and that's what my organization fights for on a daily basis.
Ray in Leavenworth, Washington. Hi, Ray, a veteran.
Yes. How you doing?
Morning.
I just wanted to make a comment about when these veterans, when they come home, they should be able to find a job. When I was in Vietnam and I came home, there weren't any jobs at all. And when there's no jobs, it'll lead to this suicide. It'll lead to alcohol and drug abuse. Because there's no jobs, they don't have anything to do.
And Ray, whose responsibility is that? The private sector? Is it on companies to make an effort to hire veterans, or does the federal government need to step in?
No, the way it worked when I came home, finally somebody did something. I don't remember who the president was. I think it was Jimmy Carter. Anyways, what he did was he gave the corporations a tax break. For every veteran that they hired, they got a certain amount of a tax break. And I found a job then. I got a job.
What job did you get? What job did you get, Ray?
Yeah, go ahead.
What job did you get?
I got a job working in a steel mill.
And how long did you work there?
Pardon me?
How long did you work there, Ray?
I worked there for 2 years because I couldn't, after getting on there, I couldn't do that job. I became a machine there. I just didn't, it wasn't for me.
But you got a job. That's the point. Melissa Bryant, do you agree with the caller there?
We certainly agree that every veteran deserves a job. It's why we fight so hard in working with not just the Department of Veterans Affairs, but the Department of Labor, and ensuring that there are programs that we're matching the veteran with the employer. That's probably the best way of putting it, because whether it's working in a steel mill, working in federal government or state and local government, depending on whatever your tradecraft or skill set was coming out of the military. Maybe you were an 88 Mike, you were, which in the Army is a, truck driver, military mechanic. Maybe you want to do that when you cross over into civilian life. Then we want to ensure that you have the credentials and licenses in order to be able to take that skill set with you into the civilian sector. Or maybe you want to do something completely different. Maybe you were an 11 Bravo, which is an infantryman, and you want to move from that into a position of management. And so maybe use your GI Bill and receive the education and training that you need in order to go into a completely different lifestyle. And so that's one of the reasons that we fight so hard to defend the GI Bill from any cuts or any waste or abuse that it's been used for, unfortunately, in the past. And we also want to ensure that employers know that veterans are a resource. We are a return on investment in America when you hire veterans, and wholeheartedly agree with the caller that when you come home from war, or whether you're done with your service and you're ready to transition into civilian life, there should be a job waiting for you.
Dean in Louisville, a veteran as well. Good morning to you.
Yes, I'm a Vietnam veteran. VA to me has been a horrible experience. In December, I'm praying I get out of VA. I got health problems. The medication, you don't get much choice of pills yet. I got high blood pressure. All they do is take you off any good pills to put you on all the cheapy pills. And, I'm talking about VA's improvement. There's a lot of veterans who used to go VA. They got qualified for Obamacare, so a lot of them veterans go to private health care now. I know a couple of them who would have died. They said that they had been continuing going to VA, but they qualified Obamacare, so they started going to regular doctors. The doctors started doing some stuff for them. They found out they had problems that VA didn't try to take care of you.
Okay, Melissa Bryant, you were shaking your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, sadly, this is what I said at the beginning of our segment, and that is the VA is a mixed bag. We hear from our members, and I'm hearing from our callers, that some have wildly positive experiences and are satisfied with the care they received in VA, even life-saving care from the VA. Others who have challenges, whether it's from medication, over-medication, under-medication, whether it's challenges with the location of the VA that they've been directed to go to, challenges with the staff that maybe have been unfriendly or unwelcoming. We hear all of these stories, and sadly, it's not just anecdotal. It is a culture change issue. We do see it slowly changing, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in center by center, from the local level all the way up through the VA's central office in Washington, D.C., to ensure that there's accountability for the care that the VA provides our veterans.
Nat, Baltimore, a veteran. Good morning, Nat.
Hi, this is Nat. Thanks for C-SPAN. I'm a World War II vet, and I saw the evolution of VA. When I first got out, I got telephone calls on why I'm not going back to school and why I am not working at a job that they thought I should. And gradually, the infection of becoming a bureaucracy changed that considerably. However, in the past year, I ran into my first medical problem, and that is my hearing, which was affected by being a tank driver back in World War II, got worse, and I called the VA and got an ombudsman who was very interested in my problem and looked into the fact that a lot of the World War II vets' records were destroyed sometime in the 70s in a fire, that he would go to my discharge paper that I had and validate the fact that I needed a hearing aid. And I thought that was very accommodating, and I think that Dr. Shulkin probably although I've also heard that Baltimore was one of the good places to be in. But I believe that what Dr. Shulkin has done lately, especially this ombudsman thing, is a very big improvement.
Hey, Nat, before you go, you are how old?
Well, I was 90 last month.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
And you said the hearing loss that you have is a recent ailment. You didn't have any other problems until then?
No, thank God. I've always had tinnitus as a result of being in a tank car, but my actual hearing loss was only affected by the tinnitus, and I tried very hard to ignore it. I benefited from the VA very much because I did go back to school, became an engineer, and over the years I wound up being the Navy's Director of Science and Technology when I retired, which I thank the VA for. I also got help buying my house, which I still live in, strangely enough. But we've been here 50 years.
Well, Nat, thank you very much for your phone call this morning. It's thank you for that history lesson as well. Melissa Bryant.
Yes, so heartwarming to hear from you. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and so I appreciate hearing the story of your service, the journey post World War II. My paternal grandfather, he was sadly killed in action in World War II. But my father, who was an infant at the time, went on to serve at Vietnam as an infantry platoon leader, continued to serve for 27 years beyond that, before his retirement. And, my father commissioned me. And so I appreciate the legacy of military service within my family. And I'm very, it's very heartwarming to hear stories like yours, sir. Thank you very much.
You can learn more if you go to IAVA.org. Melissa Bryant, their Chief Policy Officer for the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America group. We thank you for the conversation this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.